I'd like to welcome to the stage our special guest, John Riccitiello. Now, John worked as the board of directors at Telltale Games. Most recently, though, he is working as CEO, chairman, board director, and investor at Unity Technology, so he is a very busy man, definitely. I also like to welcome to the stage, though, our moderator for this session, Mike Gallagher, the president and CEO at Entertainment Software Association, which, as many of you guys know, is the trade association representing U.S. computer and video game publishers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage John Riccitiello and Mike Gallagher.
Well, John, welcome back to the stage at VentureBeat. And just briefly, I think all of us in this room are familiar with John's current leadership role at Unity and his history at EA and Elevation Partners, and maybe some people in the room are familiar with his career before that with Sara Lee and Pepsi and Wilson Sporting Goods, right? No, I got one here they're gonna like. What you don't know is, may not know, most of you don't know, is that John was also, for 3 years, the chairman of the board of ESA. And during that time, he led from the industry side our victory in the Supreme Court that established the free speech rights of everyone in this room. And John was the man at the helm of that exercise with the board. And 2 years later, he led our response to Newtown, where we were falsely accused of all sorts of evils, and it was John's energy that really helped us turn that around. And so we're very fortunate to have John here. We owe him a debt of gratitude. So John, let's start with startups. So you look at your recent report that you put out from Unity, 220,000 some odd games that were made on Unity in the last quarter, 4.2 billion downloads on 1.7 billion devices, some such numbers, something like that. Lots and lots of engagement. What's the environment right now for startups, and what's it take to be successful?
Wow, that's a big question. I'm not sure I'm solely prepared to answer, but I'll give you a couple of thoughts. So if you read anything or you watch interviews, developers, particularly in the mobile arena, and there's so many new startups there, they complain a lot over just how hard it is. They talk about how the Supercells and the Kings and others are at the very top of the charts, and that never moves, and the massive expenditure involved in the cost to acquire a new user and how difficult it is to monetize. And so if you got a sort of a top 50 chart that doesn't seem to change, it looks like the impossible mountain. And it's sad, but on a very regular basis, I'm asked to give a reference for somebody that was in a startup or did a startup, and it didn't work. And it is bloody hard out there. But if I were to just sort of pull back just a little bit and give you an insight maybe into why that happens. And I think it starts with the real motivation for why people start up game companies. And I would argue that there are way more started up that have the motivations that I would argue are the right motivations to do it. More often than not, what I've met and see are folks that, they might not have gotten their manager or director promotion in the larger company they were working with. They were frustrated that the company they worked with wouldn't produce a game that they wanted to work on. They ran into some sort of career frustration, and that was enough to get them to sort of like blow it off, tackle a little bit of relatively easy VC money. It's not so easy these days, but it looks easy when you're in the, sort of imagining it all coming together. And I would argue that that really is almost never going to work. If we think about the professional industry of entertainment, building games, think of it as like the NFL or the NBA. Well, look at the Warriors. These are amazing teams of people that have a very, very clear idea of what their source of competitive advantage, what makes them better. And so it's amazing. I'll meet a team and they'll say, oh yeah, I'm the BD guy and I was the marketing guy. We're still looking for a designer and we're out here raising money to start a company, or they've just got the designer. I would argue that the only startups that I see work are invariably people possessed of an absolutely crystal clear vision of what they're trying to build. They're not saying, I'm not sure if it's going to be premium versus free to play. They know exactly what they're trying to build. They know exactly who they're going to build it with. They know exactly how it's going to be differentiated in the marketplace. They've got a clear-eyed view of what good is. They look at whether it's graphic quality or gameplay or multiplayer versus not, the business model. They see a clear spot in a red ocean. They see a blue island that they can land on, and they're going right for it. And too often I meet folks that are out there raising money or have raised money and they're building something. I kind of wanted to be a CEO of a game startup. And that's just not enough. So, it is tough, without doubt. But I would say that if you can't be absolutely clear and compelling about what you're building, why you're building it, who it appeals to, how it's different, and who's going to build it with you, and why you think you're better than anybody else out there to meet that need, keep your day job.
Well, breaking down a couple of those, how important is the team component when you're looking at the success forecast for a startup?
Look, I think the team's just about everything. In fact, I'd bet on team before idea, given a choice in this industry. Talent is a lot scarcer than it looks. It's hard to make a great game, but part of what I would look at in, there's a lot of brouhaha recently over the long hours people put in the game industry, and I'm not going to comment one way or another whether that's a good idea or not. But I will tell you, the games at the top of the charts, the games that will get to the top of the charts, are driven by people that have a maniacal focus of making every pixel perfect. They care about the craft. Look at anything in the top 10 or 20 or 30. You may not like the game, but what they were trying to do, they've generally executed brilliantly. The world doesn't pay for MPVs anymore. It's not a wide open blue ocean. You got to nail it. And nailing it with entertainment, that feeling in your hands when it's just right, is hard. The speaker before Jerry was talking about Nintendo. That's what set them apart. It was the craft. They crafted something that felt right, and everything worked. And you can all remember Zelda and 24321 codes and the musical sounds. They were just right. They felt right.
Well, I think that echoes what Owen said this morning. It's focus on a unique game and execution on that, and having a compelling belief in your art form. Now, you have a tool that you use quite a bit when you were on the ESA board, where you would ask a series of questions just to test what's the strength of the leader that's involved here, and how focused are you. Does that come into play when you're looking at the success of a startup?
Well, look, they introduced me as an investor. I'm a lapsed investor, so I'm not spending a lot of time testing, startup guys. A lot of developers that are trying to figure out their ideas, I will ask them about the quality of their idea, and I usually ask questions designed to help them sharpen their own thinking. I don't think some guy they're going to meet once or twice or three times is actually going to have any impact in terms of my ideas being absorbed by them. That's not going to happen. But what can happen is you can ask them hard questions that cause them to think. Mm-hmm. And if there's any value add to, besides hopefully giving them the best tools to build on, is that maybe we can ask them a couple questions that'll help them sharpen their own game.
Well, let's focus on the winners. So you get down the road, you're successful as a startup, you become a successful company today. Who are the ones you respect the most? And then what are they doing to hold that position at the top?
That's an interesting question. I mean, the number of things that have been framed out there about, the same 5 companies dominate the top 20, the same 6 or 7 games or dominate the top 10, the same 3 or 4 games seem to dominate the top 3 or 4. It feels like it's there forever. But let me explain my version of how they got there and how they've sustained it. My version of how they got there and sustained it is they started with all the right reasons. They were great people with a maniacal focus on craft, with a clear-eyed view of what they were going to build. That's what got them there. It's not what kept them there. They're playing a very different 3-level game of chess than most people in the game industry are playing. They have a sophisticated and deep understanding of the lifetime value of their customers on a cohort basis. They know what they're going to pay to play that game. They know it within a gnat's eyelash or something, but they're very precise about that. And they know it demographically, by country, by different type of user. They also know a great deal about what it costs to acquire that user. So they know they're going to spend $7 to acquire a $15 customer, or they're going to spend $45 to acquire a $300 customer. And if you can arbitrage that in real time, in nanoseconds, if you can spend 20 to buy 50, they do it all day long. And you'll see these massive marketing budgets with companies like Supercell and King and others that operate at the top of the charts, and Machine Zone. I mean, that's what they are doing. And it is massively sophisticated. And they don't have a marketing budget going into the year. What's the point? They can spend $10 million spending $40 to buy a $20 customer. Bad idea. But if they have a chance to spend $30 million to buy a $40 customer for $20, they'll do that all day long. And so they're playing a very, very sophisticated game based on deep knowledge. When they look at, like Unity's got an ad network, we'll talk about that if we have time. What's really happening there is these guys will play it, they'll play it, they'll play it, they'll buy, and then they'll stop. because they're finding that they've moved into a slightly different cohort and they know exactly where they are. That level of sophistication is something that takes a while to develop, and it takes a lot of scale to be able to learn those lessons, but they're playing a different game.
And then does that tie to the Super Bowl advertising we see? I mean, you look at the advertising, certainly from the mobile side, it's pretty pronounced and frequent.
What they're getting out of Super Bowl ads when Machine Zone runs them, aside from the opportunity to go to a commercial shoot with somebody you wouldn't mind sitting next to, is what they're getting out of that is a overall performance improvement on their click-through rates. And I'm not going to get into the CPI, CPM arbitrage. It's, for those of you who care about that, it's a fun conversation. I think there's another interesting proposition going on here. So the guys at the top right now are monetizing 100% on in-app purchase. They're not doing any advertising at all. They're not putting their inventory out there. They're buying inventory, but they're not putting their inventory out there. So one prediction for you, just to think about, is in a world where 90% or 95% or 97% of the players of these games don't pay. That's the reality of what we have with free-to-play. They don't pay. They can be monetized in an enormously successful way through advertising, in-game advertising, CPI advertising with other games or brand advertising. And I see it every day. The numbers are very, very substantial. My company is doing $20 million a month in advertising, helping our customers get to their customers. Now here's the point that I'm going to make. The data is very clear. It drives increased engagement, not reduced engagement, and it drives increased monetization, not reduced monetization. So if you're so incredibly talented and incredibly sophisticated about arbitrage and cost to acquire versus lifetime value, someone will replace you if they figure out a better arbitrage where there's more lifetime value. And so the industry, God, I've been in the industry as long as anybody in this audience, we carry a bias with us that, hey, we come from premium games and advertising's bad. The truth is, from, I'd say this year, over the next 3 to 4 years, if you're leaving a monetization model out of your business, you will be beat by somebody who brings it into their business, because that equation for the $1 billion games, the $500 million games, the $300 million games, and the $30 million games will be precisely the same. Build the craft, nail the product, but then play the arbitrage game and play it really bloody well. And if you're leaving, a major tool off the table, you're going to lose.
So in the time that we have left, let's shift to the point that the term of art that's been used that you coined, the gap of disappointment. So perhaps you could share with everyone in the room what you meant by it, and where do you see the future of VR?
So look, the last speaker Jerry was very compelling on VR. I learned a lot listening to what she had to say. But Mike, what you're talking about is something that I started talking about last year, and then in spades of late. A lot of industry analysis have put a kind of a straight line of about $7-8 billion in forecasted revenue in the game industry or the VR business this year to 2020, where they put about $120 billion on it. And I think if you look at it, I think what they've largely done is applied the smartphone adoption model to it, which was a heavily carrier subsidized model. So it brought $700 machines in your pocket that you would pay $30 for. And so that subsidization model is pretty massive. And by the time these products got to the market, they were very, very well executed. The original iPhone was a beautiful device, but even early Android phones often were pretty beautiful devices. The truth for this year is, from a hardware perspective and a software perspective, it's a masking tape and twine year. These things are barely making it to the shelf. They're barely making it to the consumer. Now, they do magical things. And I'm a giant bull on the long-term opportunity for VR and AR. But I think these revenue forecasts in the initial years, it's not going to go like this. It's going to go like this. I think they're going to miss their numbers in 2016 by 80%. They're going to miss them again in 2017 by 60% or more. Now, in the fullness of holograms dancing on your coffee table, 120 billion is not enough to describe that marketplace. So that is coming. But it's a longer term burn because the hardware is not there and it's way too expensive to really attract the mass market in the near term. In mobile, while it gives you a good experience, it's not a good enough experience to really hit that wow point. So when I talk about the gap of disappointment, what I've been referring to is that these bullish analyst forecasts are like this. The reality is going to be like this. And it's only a matter of time before people say, oh, it didn't happen. VR and AR is a hoax. It's a fizzle. The New York Times is going to run that on the front page right before Christmas to piss us all off right before we go back to the holidays and imagine our sales were going to go up. We're going to get that. Now, it's going to recover, but all of you out there, if you can, play down this year's numbers because they aren't going to happen. And don't let the journalists get away with the "I told you so." They set up this straw, monster, and the monster doesn't show up, and it's I told you so. This is so predictable. Something about maybe the presidential election feels a little bit like that too, but we'll cover that another day.
So since John's encouraged the room, let's turn to questions from all of us. Right here in the front.
John, thanks for joining us today, and thanks for your insight and all that you've done for the industry. I guess one question that I asked yesterday, and so I'll repeat it again for you, is if you could go back, either at Unity or Electronic Arts, and do something differently, what would that one thing differently be?
Well, that's easy. I would have predicted the recent generations of consoles coming when they did, as opposed to 2.5 years earlier. Now, it just meant that the EA turnaround took longer because we invested a lot to have leadership. What would I do differently? I would say that if I had to pick one thing, God, it'd be interesting. So if you want to think about the time I was at EA, for example, I was very much a packaged goods guy. And the first time, went off to private equity, I came back, and I was just maniacal about digital. I should have started digital back in '99, 2000. And now we did. We launched EA.com. We thought that was a digital play. I got to write off $280 million for the miss that was, brought us. And it was a horrible failure. You know what it was? It was Facebook meets Zynga, except on a 16K modem. And you know something? Zynga and Facebook don't look all that good, sucked through a very narrow straw and putting pixels on the screen so slow that you get bored waiting for them. So I was too early, but I probably should have kept it going, because ultimately the packaged good is dead. I mean, I'm not saying that retailers won't have a place in our space, they will. But this is guaranteed to be as digital as music is today. There'll be some people that buy, my daughter only wants vinyl. They're going to be out there, but that's not where the money is.
Well, we're going to move to close here. And John, in preparation for doing this, I had my staff do a little research because you're a pretty quotable guy. And this is one that made the cut. It says, I've had the opportunity to learn and recover from failure. Everyone fails. Everyone falls down. Everyone loses a game or gets a bad grade. And when it happens, fail well. So that kind of fits the last discussion. But really, the reason why this is, I think, most important is it's the highest form of a compliment when popular culture imitates that. And Gavin Belson of Silicon Valley says that failure is growth, failure is learning, but sometimes failure is just failure. So you taught.
Hold on, we have to stop on something else. There is nothing like success. Win the ball game, do the craft, do not go out on failure. Thanks, everybody.
That's right. Thanks, John. That's good.
Thank you so much, John and Mike.